With 196 days to go until the midterms, the number's getting smaller.
It sure is.
Yeah. We talk about the black genocide that's happening in our big cities. Kurt and I have talked a lot about this, but there are a couple of issues out there that I think tie the whole thing together. Big cities, including Kansas City. I mean, right here in our backyard. Joey B. needs to watch his back from fellow Democrats. We'll talk about that. And what's up with Florida? Ron DeSantis versus Mickey Mouse? We'll talk about that. And I think we may have a difference of opinion on that, but we'll see. That and the latest news on this week's Dale Carter's America.
From the heart of flyover country, he's not on the far right, and he's certainly not on the far left. Like you, he's somewhere in the middle. This is Dale Carter's America.
First, a little news about the podcast. We're getting a website. Should I release that yet? Should we talk about that yet?
I guess the cat's out of the bag now. So,
well, I mean, we paid for it, so it's happening. It's just a matter of when it's happening.
It is happening. Yeah, I'm working on it right now. So it's going to be a week or two before it's up. But yes, we are getting a website, and as we've mentioned before, we're always trying to expand and improve the podcast and help reach more people. So we've got a lot of things in the works, that we're working on, and that's just one of them.
Now, we'll get closer and closer to launching the website, but what's the goal of the website?
Well, the goal of the website really is to have a hub for people to go to for the podcast. So you'll be able to go there to listen to the podcast. We'll have blog posts up. We'll be writing our own articles. We'll have our beautiful faces on there, of course, and more information about the podcast. All of our links and all that kind of stuff. So really just a central location for people to, be able to go and visit and get everything they need to know. But the newest thing will be that we'll be starting a blog. So that will be a place for us to kind of flesh out our thoughts a little bit more in writing, maybe more fleshed out than just on the Facebook page, and people can go and check that out too.
Corrected for grammar and stuff like that?
Hopefully.
I hope so, too. All right, so that's still to come. And, of course, you can get the podcast any number of places. You can see us on YouTube, and there are other places they can get us.
That's right, yeah. Make sure, if you're just listening to this, make sure you go subscribe on YouTube, and then you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen to podcasts as well. And we're also on Facebook and Twitter, so make sure to give us a follow there. Leave us a 5-star review, all that good stuff, and tell your friends.
Okay. A little bit of news here before we get into the big topics of the day. The governor of Kansas, the Democrat Laura Kelly, rejected a measure, the transgender athlete bill. Now, I rewrote this when I did the news on KFKF. I rewrote it because in its original form, it said Democrat Laura Kelly rejected the measure that would have prohibited transgender athletes from playing girls' sports. I rewrote it to say Democrat Laura Kelly rejected the measure that would have prohibited biological males from playing girls' sports because I think that's more accurate.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. She cited potential harm to the state's business climate if the bill went into effect, adding that the measure came from politicians trying to score political points.
It seems more to me like scoring political points if you're trying to put men into women's sports, don't you think?
Yeah. And because that's become a thing, because you've got the big guy who's basically racking up all the records in women's sports, it's become a thing that needs to be addressed. Before, it didn't need to be addressed.
Right.
You got girls' sports, you got Title IX protecting that, making that an even playing field, and you got boys' sports over here.
Right, exactly, yeah. It wasn't an issue before. It's becoming more of an issue because it's really being pushed, I think, by the schools, by the universities, and by the culture, generally speaking. So it's interesting to me because the narrative, from a lot of Democrats seems to be they try and push this radical thing on sports or on society, broadly speaking, and then Republicans or conservatives react and say, hey, no, we don't want to do that. And then it's like, oh, look at these Republicans. They're like being political and they're pouncing, on this opportunity to score political points. It's like, well, no, we're actually just responding to what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, another topic here, gas prices. This is from today's news, unchanged for a fifth day in a row. AAA reports the national average for regular is still $4.12 a gallon. The least expensive place to fill up is in Georgia, where the statewide average is $3.71 a gallon. That's the lowest average in the country.
Wow.
California remains by far the most expensive at $5.68 a gallon. Now, I thought when Joey B tapped into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that we were going to see prices go back down.
Yeah, I haven't really noticed that.
What happened there?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Gas, I guess that's a good thing. At least they're not going up for a fifth day in a row. They are unchanged. And remember, from the White House, we know that this is Putin's fault.
Right. Putin's price hike.
Putin's price hike. Never mind the fact that before Putin ever even looked at Ukraine, gas prices were averaging over $1 a gallon more than they were under Donald Trump. This is Putin's price. They even have a hashtag. Hashtag Putin's price hike.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because Biden kind of campaigned on being accountable and being, the voice of normalcy, and he's going to take charge and the buck stops here and all that. And there's many tweets of him during the campaign saying exactly as much, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And then he just had a tweet that came out a few days ago where he was like, I understand things are hard and prices are going up, but let's be clear about one thing. This is because of Putin and climate change or whatever it was. It's like...
Well, it's the playbook, They just run whatever play works, and maybe we'll have to add like an audible for the playbook because Putin is not in the Democrat playbook as it sits right now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he kind of is. He's the playbook. Really, at the end of the day, all of those plays, they all share something in common, which is that it's just a scapegoat. It's something to push the blame off onto, aside from taking the blame themselves.
What's going to be interesting on Thursday? Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas will be testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Have you thought of any questions that you might like to ask Mayorkas? I've got several.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, where to start?
Well, let me start. I'll start, and then you can jump in here. Yeah. I would want to ask him, do you still believe that white supremacy is the number one threat to the United States of America?
Yeah.
Because he stated that over and over again.
And what we in the Department of Homeland Security have assessed is that the greatest terrorism-related threat that we face in the homeland is the threat of domestic violent extremism. Individuals drawn to violence because of ideologies of hate or false narratives propagated on social media and other online platforms. And the most prominent threat is the threat of white supremacists.
Do you really still believe that?
Yeah, that would probably be my number one question, too.
Yeah. Well, what's your number two question?
Well, my number two question, I mean, he's the Secretary of Homeland Security, right? Like, what are you doing to secure the homeland? That would be a good question.
Yeah.
How about the border? How about how about all the drugs and fentanyl and everything else that's crossing the border? What are you doing to stop that?
Yeah. Title 42 would be a great question. What do you think about Title 42, lifting that? Because I got to tell you, there are Democrat congressmen along the border who are screaming bloody murder. Do not lift Title 42. I don't know, because all the Republicans would line up against it. Democrats in border states would line up against it. The governors of the border states line up against it. It just makes me wonder, what is Joe thinking? And I ask myself that many days a week. What is Joe thinking? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, it's a good question. And this is kind of an aside, but you could say the same thing about the mask mandate on the planes, too, because that was recently dropped. And the Biden administration is already signaling that they want to challenge that court decision, that the CDC or whatever agency is going to come in and appeal the decision. So they want to try and bring masks back on planes. And it's like, it's just political suicide. Like, how dumb are you? Like, this is just not going to go well for you. If you think it's a red tsunami already, you're just making it worse.
Well, we'll get to that here in just a second because I do want to talk about that. But back to Mayorkas and the border and all that. Two stories I had this morning in the stack that kind of tie together, and I tied them together on my show on KFKF. The first story is a new program starts today for people escaping the war in Ukraine. Refugees can begin applying online to get their visa in Europe and fly directly into the U.S. What they can't do is cross into the country through Mexico anymore. That option is now over. Really?
Yeah.
Is it?
And that's an interesting point because, I mean, there's just so many questions about this whole situation. And there was people like apparently quote unquote Ukrainian refugees coming in through Mexico. It's like, how are Ukrainian refugees getting to Mexico?
Yeah.
You know, in the
If
first
you wanted
place.
to do harm in this country, you would go through Mexico.
Yeah.
It's a sieve down there.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I tied it into this story, Kurt. And we saw and heard about the tragedy over the weekend. They still haven't recovered a body as of this recording, but there's a missing National Guard soldier in Texas. His name, Bishop Evans. He disappeared in the waters Friday while trying to save two. Now, the story from the wire service says trying to save two migrants. It makes it sound so benign, so benevolent. You know, they're just little migrants. They're just trying to cross the border. Of course, I change it to two illegals crossing the river. The crew's search for the 22-year-old Guard soldier from Arlington all weekend, but they did not find him, at least yet. The other part of the story that's not covered here, those two illegals that he did save who got to the other side, they were arrested for drug trafficking. A hero at the bottom of the river that they're still trying to find, and the two people that he saved arrested for drug trafficking. And you want to tell me that the option to get into the country through Mexico isn't there anymore? That option is now over.
It's unbelievable,
Ridiculous.
man.
And it's going to get a lot worse. If they go forward with this insane policy of lifting Title 42, I mean, it's just going to be worse.
And that's really interesting because it's an angle that we don't really talk about very much. I mean, we always talk about illegals coming in, you know, what do we do about that, the border, the numbers of illegals that are coming in, but we never really talk about our people that are putting their lives on the line, you know,
Right.
like, and this is a perfect case. I mean, you know, even going back to like the quote unquote whipping incident with the Border Patrol, everyone was, oh, poor, you know, migrants. Oh, the Border Patrol's like, but what about their lives? What about the Border Patrol's lives? I mean, they're dealing with, in a lot of cases, they're overwhelmed. They're dealing with, in a lot of cases, like violent people or people bringing in drugs or people bringing in doing child trafficking and things like this. And we don't seem to be concerned for them at all. I mean, it's like the police or anything else, you know, and so that's a heartbreaking story, man.
It no doubt is. And when you look at Joe Biden's poll numbers, they are just sinking in every demographic, including Hispanics. And Hispanics who came to this country legally and did the right things, they hate this as much as anybody else does.
Yeah, probably more, honestly.
Yeah, especially because it's happening in their backyard in a lot of cases. Okay, back to masks because you brought that up. One news item from today here locally, KCK Wyandotte County schools have lifted the mask mandate. They were like one of the last ones. So masks are now optional in KCK schools. However, there are some places, you were just in Philadelphia, but it's interesting because they're back in Los Angeles, they're back in Boston, but now it's been rescinded in Philadelphia.
That's right.
So they've gone the other way. And then you mentioned the CDC lifting the mask mandate, and they probably did it. The judge basically ordered the CDC mask mandate lifted from planes. They probably did it because they knew I was going to be flying with my wife for the first time post-COVID coming up really soon. And, you know, she's, trust me, you don't want to deal with her. She's from Cass County. I sleep with one eye open. I'm just going to admit that right now. But I don't like wearing a mask. I get my hair cut at Sports Clips. Mm-hmm. That's not a endorsement of them. That's just where I get my hair cut. Have you ever been there?
Yeah, I've been there.
Do you get the VIP treatment, the MVP treatment, or whatever?
I don't know.
Where you get your hair washed and
all I know is that a pretty lady massages my head. So
you gotta love it. Well, that's the MVP treatment.
Okay,
at
yeah,
Sports
I guess
Clips.
I do get that.
But then they put this like hot towel over your face while they're washing your hair. I can't stand that. It's like claustrophobic. I'm like, get that thing off me.
Right.
So the fact that I don't have to wear a mask, I'm thankful to this judge for lifting that order. The Biden administration says they are going to fight it in court. But here's the interesting twist on that. They did not ask for a stay, which probably would have been granted. Why do you think that is?
Can you describe what that is exactly? Because
that's where you would go from this judge. You would go over her head to the next level up and say the CDC thinks this is really important for public health, and we want you to stay that order until it goes to a higher court.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
I have a
good
theory.
Question. Okay.
Got it. I have a theory because they don't want a precedent set. They don't because they know they'd lose in the Supreme Court if it went that high. They don't want that precedent set.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is probably that they have to be making a political calculation here too, because
are they? Because their political calculus is really bad.
It is really bad.
It's like my math skills. It's terrible.
Right. And maybe they're making the wrong political calculation, but it was like what I was saying before. I mean, if you, the day that happened, it was last week sometime, there was tons of videos on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else of, you know, people on the planes, and the pilot comes out and he says, the mask mandate's over, masks are now optional. And everyone like cheers and they're standing up and they're like, yeah, they rip the masks off, you know.
Your mask in the blue bag. Roll away your mask.
Woo! So, I mean, it's clearly people are sick of this, you know, people are sick of this. So I just think it's political suicide, like I said, to do anything remotely approaching trying to rescind this decision by the judge, or trying to stay it or go up to a higher court. I mean, it's just political suicide. And in that case, like we've talked about before with the whole accelerationist thing, maybe that's a good thing. You know, maybe if they do try and bring it back, then it's going to hurt their prospects even more in November. So,
well, now the administration has to walk back comments that Fauci made. Because he went out after all this and he said the courts should have no role in CDC decisions.
Right.
Both surprised and disappointed, because those types of things really are the purview of the CDC. This is a public health issue. And for a court to come in, and if you look at the rationale for that, it really is not particularly firm. And we are concerned about that, about courts getting involved in things that are unequivocally public health decisions. I mean, this is a CDC issue. It should not have been a court issue. So we're hoping that the inevitable increase in cases which we're seeing are not going to be associated with an increase in hospitalizations. So all of these dynamic things going on at the same time, it was perfectly logical for the CDC to say, wait a minute, we were planning on ending this mandate on a certain date. Let's wait a period of time until May 3rd, which was a very sound public health decision.
I mean, what banana republic does Fauci think we live in? We don't live in a dictatorship where an agency of the federal government gets to control everything without any oversight whatsoever.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we kind of do. I mean, the CDC and Dr. Fauci himself were instrumental in, you know, us getting to this place with the masks and the vaccine mandates and everything else in the first place. You know, nobody voted on that. Nobody voted on the employer vaccine mandate, or the vaccine mandate for nurses or military personnel or cops or anything else. You know, it's all just top down,
right?
You know, authoritarian type tactics. So yeah, I mean, it's par for the course.
Well, the beauty of this country is when you overreach, there's that other branch of government that's there to slap your hand and say, you know, that's a bridge too far. Just get back in your role.
Yeah.
Get back in your lane.
I think this is a good example of that. And I think we should be optimistic. We should be happy about it. But the other side of it is, I mean, it did take 2.5 years or whatever, however long it's been, 2 years. So, I mean, you know, it shouldn't have existed in the first place. And we put up with it for that long. I think it's just, it shows how much people are willing to put up with, and how much can be crammed down, you know, onto us, and nothing is bad. Nothing's going to happen about it. So
crossing my fingers that there is no stay that's going to come out of this. Actually, I think the 2 weeks was going to be up like May 4th anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And I'm flying next week too, so I'm right there with
Look
you.
at us, the jet-setting folks from Dale Carter's America.
That's right. Right. There's no bears where I'm going though, so.
Me either this time.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a couple of trips going on. Going to my happy place down in the White Sandy area where you know, I can escape this spring trying to emerge in Kansas City, where, you know, we have a frost warning again tonight.
Right.
Come on, man.
But you'll have sand bears and sharks.
Are there such sharks? I'm well aware of. Speaking of, you know, spring not exactly bursting out here in the Midwest, we've had a very cold spring. Friday was Earth Day. And, you know, we go all the way back to like Al Gore, you know, back in the day, the patron saint of global warming, that the end of the world is coming. And we've only got, what's the standard that they say? Is it like 10 years, 12 years?
10 years, 12 years, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So Friday was Earth Day. It's a day when liberals get to pontificate about, you know, how terrible things are, how rotten things are, how you are the problem.
Right.
Not me.
Right.
You are the problem.
Yeah.
You know, we have John Kerry. I mean, he is our climate czar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just do they again. What calculus are they performing here? So the administration loads up Air Force One, full of gas, full of the entire West Wing, the press corps, and everything. And then, of course, they've got a C-130 behind that because it carries with it the Beast. You know what the Beast is?
Is that the helicopter? Oh, no, the limo. Gotcha.
Yeah. Hey, there may have been a helicopter too, but the limo that
sometimes there's fighter jet escorts too,
of course,
depending on where they go.
If you need it.
Yeah.
The limo, the Beast, is, as far as I know, gas powered and probably not very fuel efficient.
Yeah, I don't think the bulletproof limo is a hybrid, most likely.
And anytime the president goes anywhere, how long is the motorcade? 30 at least?
Oh, yeah.
At least. So on Earth Day, to talk about the climate, he flies coast to coast over to Seattle. They get in their little, convoy or whatever, and they go to where he's going to pontificate. Then they get back in the jet, and they fly back to Washington, D.C. What is the what's the footprint of that, the carbon footprint?
I mean, you could probably calculate it. It would be very high, I can tell you that much. And it's like the last year or a few months ago, we talked about it briefly. I think there was another climate summit in Geneva or something like that, and Leonardo DiCaprio, John Kerry, like everyone from the administration, all flying their private jets, out to Geneva, sipping cocktails and telling the rest of us how to live. It's very amusing.
So you need to laugh at these people.
Yeah,
you really do, because they're not serious people. If they believed all this, they'd do a Zoom call.
Yeah, it's very easy. We have the technology.
Even make a big deal out of it. Joey B could say, well, because we really believe in this, we're going to be talking to some people all the way across the country, and we're not going to have any global footprint, no carbon footprint on this whatsoever.
They even have that whole fake White House set that they've built up. They can use that. I mean, it's all set up. It's ready to go. Like, what's the deal?
Okay.
Yeah,
fine.
like if you're gonna virtue signal, right? Why not do the extra virtue signal and not fly on the plane, and then you can virtue signal about not flying. You can virtue signal about, I've decided, that for this one day, even though I fly 300 days the rest of the year, we're not going to fly today because, we care about climate change and all that.
Yeah.
They could have easily done that.
You could fly to New York to get a slice of pizza, for instance, or you could stay right here in Kansas City and go to Funhouse Pizza and go see our good friend Jim Dingman.
What a transition. That was amazing. That was amazing.
I'm a professional. Don't try this at home.
Okay.
All right. Funhouse Pizza's got 2 great locations. They're in Lee Summit, of course, right there on 50 Highway, and in Blue Springs on 7 Highway. A great place to take the entire gang, order up some pizza, order up some brews, and know that you are dining at an establishment where there's a guy who owns it who thinks exactly like we do, and who spends his time poking all these people saying, really? Do you believe that? Do you believe that? What are you doing about that? I mean, he's a guy who thinks like we do.
Yeah. And you don't have to get on a private jet to go get your
Absolutely
pizza.
not. And, if you do believe, and if you've got an electric car that you paid $100,000 for to save $80 a month on gas, I'm not a math wizard, but I get that too. So even if you've got the electric car or the hybrid car, I mean, he will even let you park your what's the old hybrid, the joke?
Prius?
The Prius.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'll even let you park your Prius in the parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah. They do not discriminate based on vehicle type.
They really don't.
At Funhouse Pizza.
Even if you've got a bumper sticker, and I was following one of these that still had an Obama bumper sticker on the back of their Prius.
Yeah.
And when I pulled up alongside, guess what the driver who was alone was doing?
Wearing a mask.
They were wearing a mask. Yeah.
Called it.
You don't have to wear a mask to go to Funhouse Pizza. But if you feel like you need one, I hate to say nobody's going to make fun of you, but there might be a snicker or two as you walk by.
Yeah. Just make sure you keep the mask on while you're eating the pizza, Just shove that slice of pizza right through the mask.
If only they had a mask where you could do that. They probably don't. But we want to thank Jim Dingman and Funhouse Pizza for being one of the sponsors here of our podcast. Moving on to issue 1, we've kind of touched around the outside of this several times, but I want to dig in and really, really get into this. And that is what I'm terming a black genocide that's going on in our big cities. And really, there are 3 things that come together that are making this happen. One is the violence. You just can't get away from it. And again, the leaders of these cities, like Quentin Lucas in Kansas City, are not serious about it. And now Rick Smith is leaving as the police chief in Kansas City, and they're going to go through a search to find somebody to come here. I heard the head of the FOP locally talking about this over the weekend, and he said what holds Kansas City back, number one, you don't have the political backing of the city. The police department is governed by the state, which is very different. And I was trying to think of another situation where that happens, where the state oversees a city police department. Couldn't think of one.
Yeah, I can't think of one either. We've talked about that before with the weird kind of legislation on that.
Then there's the pay. It doesn't pay very well when you compare it to peer cities. There's the vesting issue. If you want to vest into a pension as the police chief of Kansas City, you need to be in the job for 15 years. Nobody's going to do that.
Yeah.
Other cities, it's 5. So there are things they need to do to get a police chief, so that's going to work against them. The emphasis is on guns and not on crime. We've talked about that many times. And if you look at this country, and Kansas City in particular, where gun violence deaths are up over the last 2 years already, and the last 2 years were terrible, it's happening in the black communities.
Yep.
Black on black crime.
Disproportionately, very much so in the black community, yeah. And I saw Quentin Lucas, actually, I think it was Quentin Lucas, or maybe it was NPR or someone else, shared a study about how the primary cause of death for children of a certain age has shifted from car accidents to firearms.
I heard that as well.
And of course, the angle immediately goes to gun control. That's the immediate angle. But like my first question was like, well, where is this happening? You know, where are these gun crimes happening? Is it negligent? You know, Uncle Kenny with the shotgun in the house and some kid just grabs it and blows his head off? Or is it gang related in the inner cities that is driving? I mean, we just had, you were talking about just a couple weeks ago, there was a kid that was killed in Kansas City. And in Philadelphia, I was just home a couple weeks ago in Philly, there was like a 4-year-old kid that was shot. And there was like 5 murders in the 3 days that I was home. And it's a lot of kids, unfortunately, because these kids are being brought into the gang circles, initiation, you know, all these things. And, you know, what's the demographics of these underage firearm fatalities? You know, let's look at that. Let's actually break down what's really happening instead of just seeing the thing and saying, you know, guns are the problem. And it's a cultural thing. You know, it's a cultural issue. It's gang related. And it's lack of policing. You know, it's all of the above.
And where are the civil rights leaders in all this? Where are the Jesse Jacksons? Where are the Al Sharptons? Why aren't they in these cities saying this is a genocide going on? And that's just one of the 3 legs of the stool that I think are leading to, seriously, a genocide in our inner cities. Abortion is another. I mean, you know, and now there are states that are starting to challenge abortion laws, tighten abortion laws. And where do abortions happen in an inordinate number? They're happening in the inner cities.
Yep. Again, very disproportionately. I mean, you can look at New York City, for example. More black babies are aborted than are born in New York City. And this is data from 2018 or 2019, I believe. And that is just heartbreaking. I mean, and, you know, we can get deeper into the abortion issue, but regardless of where you stand on it, like the numbers are just astounding. I mean, since Roe v. Wade, we're talking about tens of millions of aborted babies since Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Disproportionately in the black community. And it's happening in every major city. It's happening in Kansas City too. I mean, there's a Planned Parenthood right up the street from here on 39th Street that I drive by all the time. And, I mean, there has to be something done about it.
And yet the Democrats are banging the drum here anytime that there's any challenge or making it more difficult or getting parents involved to make this a family decision. Anytime that happens, the Democrats are out there saying the Republicans are taking away your right to abort your baby.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, what kind of rights are we dealing with if that is considered a right to kill another human being? I mean, it's unbelievable.
And then you get to the third leg of the stool, which is anti-family policies that have been going on probably since Lyndon Johnson was president. and it has really destroyed the black family as we know it. So I know, Kurt, that we don't have probably a lot of black listeners to the podcast, but we'd like to get the word out, I think, that we've got to do something about this. Because what happens is black politicians typically, Emmanuel Cleaver, I'll throw a name out there, you don't see them for 2 years, and then election time is coming up, and we've got the midterm coming up in 196 days, and then all of a sudden he's back in those neighborhoods saying, hey, I'm one of you, I'm down with the struggle, okay? But what's he doing? How is he making lives better for those people who live in those areas?
They're not doing anything. And I mean, you mentioned Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and those types. I mean, the reason that they're not talking about this is because it doesn't make them money. It's not profitable to them because they know it's just like, conservatives don't want to be aggressive on a lot of these issues because they're afraid. They're afraid. And Jesse Jackson, he knows if he goes into the black community and he strays at all from the narrative that white people are to blame, it's white supremacy, it's racism, it's, the legacy of slavery and everything else, instead of saying what needs to be said, which is going into these communities and saying, listen, there's accountability here. We need to clean up our own act. We need to stop killing each other. We need to preserve the family. We need to improve our culture and do all of these things that, rest on our shoulders and our shoulders alone. That's not going to sell. That's not going to sell to the masses. It's not going to be, palatable to the media and all of these things. So of course he's not going to say it. He's going to go say the same thing over and over again. He's going to, get millions of dollars from all these organizations. He's going to go on TV and he's going to say the same old tired stuff because that's what makes him money. That's what gets him on TV. That's what keeps him relevant. Is
there an end to that coming, though? I ask that because Black Lives Matter got caught, buying this multi-million-dollar mansion out in California, and now there's blowback on that. You've got victims that live in these cities trying to raise their family, doing the best that they can, and all of a sudden they're in the crossfire, and the crossfire is getting worse. So I'm a optimistic guy. So I'm hoping that somewhere there's going to be leaders that say, hey, just exactly what you said, that there's got to be an end to this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe you're right. I mean, we do see some of that. We do see some more activism on the conservative side just in general, but certainly within the black community. But it's tough because these narratives just sell. It's so much easier to tell somebody that somebody else is to blame for their problems than it is to tell them that they're to blame for their own problems and that they need to get their lives in order. That's not something that anyone wants to hear, regardless of color or wealth or family status or anything else. And it's not easy. It's not easy to say to people. It's not easy to hear. And it's going to be very hard to overcome those narratives. And we've already seen with every other issue that we talk about, the hypocrisy just doesn't matter most of the time. If you look at the hypocrisy of Joe Biden on, inflation, gas prices, the border, COVID, all of these other things, people still support him. People are still going to vote for him because he's not Donald Trump. He's not a conservative. You can look at the hypocrisy of Black Lives Matter and the houses that they're buying, where the money's going. What are they actually doing to support these communities? Basically nothing. But that doesn't matter because it's the narrative that they're selling, and the narrative is very poisonous and it's very effective, and it's hard to get people to leave that unless you really, I think what it's going to take is more conservatives actively going into these communities, because that's a big problem with Republicans right now. It's like, and we see this in Kansas City, right?
Yeah.
Republicans it's like a given that the Kansas City urban core is going to vote Democrat, and they just don't do anything about it. They don't go campaign in the urban core. They don't try and spread the message to these people. They just give up right out of the gate. Nobody's going in and talking to these people, to these communities, and that's what we need to do.
So it's going to take a Democrat, a brave Democrat, to go in and clean up the mess or talk about the mess.
Maybe, but I don't think Democrats are going to do that. But I mean, it's the same thing I was saying about Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson.
Maybe they will after the red tsunami. Because after the red tsunami, they're going to have to pick up the pieces and they're going to have to figure out a message that comes back. We don't want one party ruling this country, no matter which party it is. So I'm for two very strong parties. And what I'm trying to do is give Democrats a blueprint for how they can get back into the game here.
Yeah,
and it's going to take turning the inner cities around.
I just don't see Democrats pushing for accountability in that way.
Not this crop.
No, I don't see it ever really, because it's just not. It's not their MO.
Yeah.
You know, they would have to basically become conservatives.
Right. Well, let's move on to Joey B., who is not a conservative. Now, we talked about this last time, I think, that he told Obama that he was going to run for re-election in 2024. Mm-hmm. As ludicrous as that sounds, he's falling every day. I mean, it's just worse and worse. I mean, sometimes it's funny, but sometimes you feel like you're laughing at somebody who you probably shouldn't be laughing at.
Yeah. Did you see the one of him turning and shaking hands with the air?
God bless you all.
You know, and I was going to mention that because the White House says their take on it is he was waving at people who were behind him. And if you look at the shot, you can see that the crowd kind of wraps around, and there might be an argument that he was like waving over there. So it could be taken either way. But here's what I want to ask about is the ReElection Plans. He spoke those to Obama, and then it got leaked. Why did it get leaked?
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems like there's always a reason for everything, right? There's always a reason.
Why did they leak that he told Obama he was going to run for re-election? Because I think I get a sense that the grand bargain, we're at the end of the grand bargain here, that you're starting to see stories every day that the laptop from Hunter Biden is taken more seriously. Mm-hmm. New York Times, Washington Post have written stories about it now. The mainstream media is starting to talk about it. There will be ties to Joe Biden because there have to be ties to Joe Biden. So the jig may be up, and they may be looking for what they're going to do following this, because it's a mess if you're a Democrat.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if I had to speculate why something like that would be leaked, it'd probably be because they want the news out that he's going to run so that everyone can be like, oh, come on, like he can't run again. There's no way he can run again. And so then they can kind of get ahead of it and position themselves with
where do they go?
Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg or Michelle Obama or someone else.
Yeah, that's just totally ridiculous. First of all,
is it though?
Let's take them one at a time. Kamala Harris never got above 1% when she ran last time. She was the first one to drop out. People in her own party don't like her. Yeah. Her staff can't stand her. They cannot keep a staff around her.
Yeah, I think Kamala, of those three that I mentioned, Kamala is probably the least likely.
And, she basically confirms the fact that she's an idiot every time she opens her mouth.
Yeah.
Word salad just comes out. Okay, Pete Buttigieg. What right does he have to run for president? I know that anybody of a certain age can run for president, but let's look at his resume. He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, which is about the size of Independence, Missouri. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's all he's got. And he ran for president based on that.
But he's gay.
He checks a box. Yeah. Okay, he's gay.
That's all they care about.
Is that the next thing for the Democrat Party?
That's all they care about.
They've gotten a black president. They've gotten a black female vice president. They've gotten the first black female justice of the Supreme Court. So that's the next box they need to check?
He's gay, and he's charismatic and a good speaker, and he's very presentable in public, and he's a good campaigner. That's it.
Okay. I don't see me voting for him, but that should not come as a big shock to anybody. And it has nothing to do with him being gay.
Homophobic.
It has everything to do with the fact that he has no experience whatsoever, and of course his policies would be completely opposite of mine. Now, Michelle Obama basically has said she would never run for elective office. She's seen the sausage made, and she doesn't want any part of it. You think she would?
I think that's bullshit. Yeah, I mean, I think she has to know that there's a lot of support for her out there. I mean, people love Michelle Obama for whatever reason. And yeah, I think she could become the next Hillary Clinton, if you will.
Well, you know me, I'm always going to say policy over personalities. But then you go to the Republican side, and the Republicans' bench is very deep again. Mm-hmm. And it was deep in 2016. Remember, there were like what was there, 18?
18 or 18, 20, something like that. Yeah.
And Donald Trump emerged out of that. Asa Hutchinson, governor of Arkansas, is now making the rounds in Iowa and New Hampshire. And then, of course, you've got the governor of Florida. You got Senator Scott down in South Carolina. I mean, Nikki Haley, South Carolina. You've got Donald Trump hanging out there, who's basically saying things like, hey, miss me yet?
Yeah. I can't say yet if I'm going to run, but let's just say when I do make my announcement, you're going to be very happy.
This is why you want to see the podcast on YouTube, because when Kurt goes into his Donald Trump, the hands come out.
Yep. You got to get the hands.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, then you get into the whole what the president meant to say, confusion over Title 42 and the judge ending masking on planes. He got those two completely conflated to the point where the White House had to come out and say what the president meant to say. There are 1,001 more days as we tape this podcast, 1,001 before January 20th of 2025. That's a long time.
It's a lot of days, yeah. We're only a year and 3 months in.
So as the Hunter Biden thing kind of blows up and we find out who the big guy was, it was funny. I was watching Biden over the weekend, and he made a big deal out of the fact that, I was consistently rated the poorest person in Congress. That's his That's his badge he wears. He was the poorest person in Congress.
Yeah. Well, he's not poor anymore. That's for sure.
He's got millions of dollars. He's got houses everywhere. Yeah. How did he get that without ever having a real job? Did he ever write a book? Because a lot of them write a book.
Well, they write a book using quotation marks with my fingers because they get ghostwriters, but I don't know if he has or not. I'm sure there will be a book, that comes out after he's done being president, and it's going to be written in perfect English with no flubs and no ramblings whatsoever. And that's how you can tell that it was not written by Joe Biden, just like his Twitter feed, not written by Joe Biden.
Well, my theory is that this whole thing comes back to the leak of him running for re-election, and that Joey B., if your people are watching our podcast or monitoring our podcast, I'm not sure how that all works.
They obviously are. I mean,
obviously.
Let's be honest.
Obviously are. You might want to watch out for Democrats because, Caesar was knifed by his friends.
Yeah.
So,
Pete Buttigieg is coming for you, man.
Gotta watch out for that. All right, finally today, Florida versus Disney, DeSantis versus Mickey Mouse. I mean, the whole thing is Mickey Mouse to me, but I'm curious where you fall on this. Let me tell you where I fall on it and see if we agree or not.
Sure.
Because in my own house with my wife, who thinks I'm a liberal sometimes, that's how conservative she is. She thinks I'm way off base on this.
Right on.
So knowing that the two of you think alike, you're probably going to think I'm way off base on this. I think this is an error on DeSantis's part. So what's happened is the Disney conglomerate made a big deal out of the Florida bill. They mischaracterize it to the point where in the media, that's how it's displayed. It's the Don't Say Gay bill. Mm-hmm. It's not a Don't Say Gay bill. It basically says we don't want sex education for K through 3.
Right.
We don't want you talking to our kids about, transgenderism or gayness or straightness, or we just don't want our kindergarten through third graders exposed to that.
Right.
And most parents are on board with that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So Disney is getting tremendous blowback for it. Mm-hmm. Okay. There is a unique thing for the Disney Corporation that goes back to when Walt Disney decided to make the Orlando area the home of Disney World. They got an exemption, a carve out for a district, and they basically are their own government. Okay, so the Florida legislature, and DeSantis has already signed the bill, have revoked that special status. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's why I think that's an error. There are people who live around Disney World. It's kind of like when you drop a bomb somewhere, there are unintended casualties. You kill people who live around where you've dropped the bomb, okay? There are people who live around Disney World now who are going to be responsible for debt they did not have before, government expenses they did not have before, because Disney did this, and the knee-jerk reaction from the Florida legislature and DeSantis was, well, we'll just take away your exemption. We'll just take away your special deal.
That's interesting. I mean, I do disagree with you, but I hadn't heard that argument made before. So you're saying that there are other people that are living in the area that are covered by the Disney
by the district
exemption that are not part of Walt Disney Company.
Right. And so all those expenses, all that debt has been covered by the Walt Disney Corporation.
Well, I think the most fundamental question, I mean, there's a few questions, but the most fundamental question is why should they have been given a tax exemption in the first place?
Well, again, that goes back to, you're talking about the 1950s
Right.
For that. But what I'm saying is by removing that exemption, you have now exposed all the voters who live in that area to more debt, higher taxes, putting
Right,
together
but what
things.
about like if this is the line right here and there's
Yeah.
somebody living on this line that has the exemption and somebody living on this side of the line that doesn't have the exemption? That's not fair, right?
Well, fair is in the eye of the beholder. But if you live close to there and this impacts you negatively, what are you going to think? And again, my whole point is, why did it need to be done? Disney is already taking slings and arrows over this.
I can address that too.
Just sit back and let them. It's like when your opponent is making a mistake, you don't throw them a lifeline. You don't make them a victim.
Right, but they're not just, making noise. I mean, they're actively subverting the culture. I mean, their response to the bill in Florida was to say, we're going to create more gay content for kids. We're going to push this stuff on kids more because we disagree. And that should not be allowed. I'm sorry.
And in the market of ideas, in the free market, when they do that, I mean, look what it started in Virginia with the governor's race in Virginia. Mm-hmm. Parents rose up and said, you can't say to us that we have no role in our kids' education.
Right.
Okay. Now what's happening at Disney is, their stock is going through the floor. Right? Mm-hmm. There are consequences in the real world. All I'm saying is DeSantis did something he did not need to do. The Florida legislature did something they did not need to do. They could sit back and watch Disney implode over this because the more they do things that aren't supported by the market, the more it hurts them as a company.
Yeah, I just disagree. I mean, I think the government does have a role in this. Again, this is why I'm not a libertarian anymore, because I think that the government does have a role in preserving the culture and not, that's even aside from the fundamental issue, which I don't think you've answered to be honest, is like, why should this tax exempt status for Disney?
It's not tax exempt status. It's the fact that this district is governed by Disney. So
Right,
they have a police department and a fire department.
Right.
And they take care of infrastructure and things like that. And so what you're doing by taking that away is now all of a sudden this city's responsible, this city's responsible, this city's responsible in ways that their budget right now does not support. So
Right,
taxes will go up.
The practical application of that is that it is saving them money to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Disney has been saving money because they haven't been held accountable for the same things as everyone else in the state of Florida. Why? What's so special about Disney? I mean, I don't care about Disney. Why should they have special privileges? It's like, it's crony capitalism. You're playing favorites for this corporation or that corporation.
Well, good luck winding all that back, because there are exemptions and carve-outs for every Major League Baseball team, every National Football League team, every amusement park. I mean, you're going to spend a long time doing that. And the flip coin of that, where I'll flip it, is what if it were a Democrat legislature and a Democrat governor and they didn't like a private company, and so they went after them and took away their special exemptions.
Right, but like the language of going after them is
This clearly goes after Disney.
Well, yeah, it is going after Disney, but it's not going after them like, oh, we're going to punish you, like we're going to take you out of Florida or something, which maybe they should do, honestly.
Disney may leave Florida.
That would be great. That would be fantastic.
See, the state of Florida made a decision back in the 1950s that having Disney World in our state will probably bring a lot of people. And Florida is one of those states that does not have a state income tax because they get so much money from tourism.
Right.
I mean, these things, it's not a black and white world. We live in a lot of grays.
Yeah, for sure. But part of it not being a black and white world is that there are things that are more important than money. I mean, there are things that are more important than, the tax status of a company. There are things that are more important than, revenue from whatever. I mean, Florida is doing great. They have plenty of revenue coming from other sources besides Disney World. And I guarantee you, if Disney World leaves, someone else is going to come in and take their place. I guarantee it. And, there are more important things. Like, do we want a large multinational corporation in our state that is actively talking about promoting an LGBT agenda on children?
Would you have taken away the special exemptions for NFL teams when they were promoting Black Lives Matter?
Maybe that would be an interesting conversation. Yeah.
All right. So how can people reach us so that they can weigh in on this? Because this is a good debate.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think maybe we'll put up something on the Facebook page and people can chime in. So make sure you go to Facebook at Dale Carter's America, and on Twitter, I'll create a poll on Twitter as well. Twitter at Dale Carter's Amer. And share your thoughts.
Yeah.
Are you on Team Dale or Team Kurt on this one? No, but obviously I'm just.
And unlike a Democrat politician, I will admit I can be wrong sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. But I'm not wrong on this one.
Yeah. All right. Fine. He's wrong. All right. So before we leave you, I wanted to share this with you. My friend Dave T. Poole, and he and I went to grade school together back in Indiana. Great guy. Listens to the podcast sometimes. I don't know if he listens to every episode, but he put up a picture. And this is from a bank statement, July 23rd, 1981. Now, you weren't born yet, but I can tell you that in 1981, Ronald Reagan had just started as president. We were digging out of the Jimmy Carter years. And in 2025, whoever wins is going to be digging out from the Joe Biden years.
No doubt.
He can blame Vladimir Putin all he wants. We're going to be digging out from the Joe Biden era. But the difference between 1981 and 2022 is this. What do you think you can get on a short-term CD at the bank these days? Just putting your money in the bank.
Like a percent?
Yeah, percent.
Oh, man. I don't know. 5?
No, not even close. Right now, you can't even get above 1% at the bank.
Geez.
I mean, it's terrible. I mean, just a passbook account, I think it's like half of 1%. It's terrible. Okay, so this is from July 23rd, 1981. If you tied up your money for 10 to 29 days, the rate was 15%. Just 10 to 29 days. If you went 30 to 59 days, you made 17 3/4.
Wow.
I mean, that's how high the rates were then to offset this. I mean, the good thing that happened back then, as bad as things were, if you had money on the sideline, you could make money by saving money.
Right.
Now you can't do that.
Right.
So, the stock market has been falling. Prices are going way high. I mean, I'm not sure how we dig out of this.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it before, but saving your money is not really a viable option anymore. You have to invest in something tangible, like crypto or real estate or luxury
Risk
cars or whatever it is. Yeah. Precious metals, but just putting your money into a high growth savings account is not viable.
I just thought that was interesting of looking at 1981 through that lens versus now.
It really puts things into perspective, on how much things have changed in terms of monetary policy. Because I have to say, speaking about admitting when you're wrong, I mean, monetary policy, tax policy, things like that, I have a very surface level knowledge of. It's certainly not my area of expertise, I would say.
Nor is it anyone in the administration.
Yeah, right. But it's interesting to hear that, I had no idea.
All right. And on that note, we'll leave you until next week. This is Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to dalecartersamerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.